Welcome back to the Talking Schemes podcast. I'm your host, Scheme Guide. Today I've got Coach Scott back, and this week we're going to be talking about his 3-4 disguise scheme. It's a scheme that's really heavy into a lot of match quarters and palms and cover six and a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm real excited to have you back. Welcome back, Coach Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Right off the top, what's kind of been your history on the defensive side of the ball? In episode 1, you joined us and we talked a lot about, the Packers and, you learning the West Coast, coming from the spread kind of option kind of game on offense, and you've come to the West Coast and the wide zone offense in particular. But on the defensive side, what's been kind of your evolution?
But we ran a bastardized Miami 4-3. So over front, sets of the strength, wide 9 on a tilt. Like every defensive lineman was on a tilt, and their aiming point was the V-notch of the next inside lineman. So we had a 9, a 3. We called them a 0 shade. I guess you can call them a 1, but was really eye to eye essentially. With the center, just barely shaded weak. And that dude was in a 4-point stance. And that guy at the time, we were in a big high school, but that dude was 160 pound, like 5'7" wrestler. He got in a 4-point stance and he just shot right out of that, like 0 steps, shot right out of that. And he had like 50-some tackles for a loss. It was insane. And then a 5 on the back side of it. So, but we didn't play like the actual Miami 4-3 where Jimmy Johnson would play quarters behind it. We played cover 0. Now we weren't necessarily blitzing anyone, but at any given time, we could just tag, one person is going to blitz depending on, what the formation was, what the tendency was, etc. But otherwise, by formation, we identify who our man is, and we are, we have all of that guy wherever he goes. The man everywhere he goes, my girl. So I played corner in that because I was, a $160 soaking wet, and the league we played in didn't pass much. So I was really going to be secondary support on the run, and I'm trying to, we played a lot of option teams, so I was outside to in on the pitch man. So whoever's running that arc route with the quarterback executing double option, I was outside in leveraging him, so that way I could force him back to my help. So that's where I got a little bit of I start essentially from the defensive perspective and understanding, how that worked, and our defensive coordinator, he had some stupid name. He called it the scream and splatter, or spill and splatter. But basically, we were spilling everything that we can, and that's why our defensive line were on a tilt, because they were going to spill, pinch in, and spill everything. And then we're sitting with 2 high safeties at 10 yards, and they're just read stepping, flowing to the ball. So it played a lot like quarters does in the run game, just with an over front. So with that, coming to like Madden, right? Because when I coached in that system when I was in college. The only other time I was in a different system, we were playing the 4-2-5. So we had a 6, a 3, a 1, and a 5. So it was an over front, but we kind of played that. It's like a loose 1, almost a 2-eye with that nose. And then it was, base cover 3 or, 1 rat, right, with a low hole player. So those were the 2 coverages we played out of that. And it's just different because it's a box team, right, with your overhangs playing contained. But when you break that contain, or you break that umbrella, if you were to draw that out, those are going to be long touchdowns. I like the layers in the quarters defense, right? So whatever front you're playing to that, I like how it works out of a 3-4.
What led you to the 3-4? Because it seems like you really came from that 4-down lineman kind of world, and then that eventually led to you getting into the 3-4. What was it? Just something in Madden, or was it because
I
of
really
the
liked him
Packers?
there.
And
I know
I guess when they had
Dom
there by the end, I
Gifford.
think everyone in Green Bay was celebrating when he was fired. What was that like for you as a Packers fan?
Yes, we were. Well, I mean, because I wanted to emulate what the Packers did in real life and in Madden. So I didn't really know much about the different fits, right? Like, 'cause I knew what I knew of just coaching a very basic 40 front. And so I really didn't truly understand the fit and how, like, the techniques that they play. So I just let the front do what the front did, and I would try to use it whoever. But kind of fast forward to when Mike Pettin took over, which I was very excited about, because the Rex Ryan playbook from the Jets had been out there for a while. I could go in and learn as much as I can just from reading through that playbook, and then build my own playbook right from that. Because what I hated with Capers' defense is he still wanted to two-gap people. And we didn't really, once we lost, like after the Super Bowl 45, and the Packers lost Cullen Jenkins, who's number 77, I felt like he was such an important part of that defense that without him, we were playing down a gap, essentially. Like, there was not somebody being able to go in and play that effectively. And so that's why I thought our run defense just went to crap from there for several years. And then when Pettin came in, it's a one gap defense for the most part. So, you take the leash off of the dogs and you let them go eat, right? And that was one thing that, like, Mike Daniels, who was number 76, and I bought his jersey right before the Packers cut him. I was so mad. That he was one of my favorite players for a long time. So that was one of the things that he said. It simplified things for them, and they could, they just have their gap and they, go to town. But I was when we were looking for a new defensive coordinator, even before Pettin was hired, Fangio was available. And I was hoping to God the Packers were going to steal Fangio from the Bears, because I loved what I saw of this defense. I didn't know much about it at the time, but I really would just wanted to take Fangio from the Bears and then beat the Bears with Fangio.
Yeah, and I remember that Rex Ryan playbook you're talking about. It seemed like that defense then, at least, was really predicated around cover 1 and cover 3, kind of like what you're talking about, that 4-2-5. Is that what you kind of took from that playbook, from what you remember, and how did that evolve?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of single high. Yeah, so it's a lot of single high. I would say the majority of the two high coverages they play is quarter half, or cover 6 in Madden, which they called Pat, so 6 Pat, get it? Clever Rex Ryan. But yeah, so those are the 3 main coverages that you would see all throughout that playbook. And, at that time, let's say 2017 to 2019, where, like, NFL went to this, in droves, went to one high, right? Especially as a Seattle 4-3 cover 3 defense. The Legion of Boom was just wrecking people for years, and then they hired all Pete Carroll's assistants to run that defense and get shredded. Being in a one high defense, if you remember that LA Rams Chiefs Monday night game where it was like 51 to 49. Right? A game. Of course it was, because you're run and shoot, and you just put 481 yards through the air on me in this last game. Whatever. Okay. Irrespective of that, like, that game was like, who can throw over the bat?
Well, that's, I think,
that's what that game was.
It exploded so much here in recent years. there's so many ways they can
Exactly.
attack one hide. You're wrong no matter what you do.
I mean, it's a very sound structurally, right? It just depends. I mean, so many people can attack it so many different ways. And where it was challenging, and where I first got turned on to like the Fangio style of defense with staying too high, 80+% of snaps, is that with one high you got to chase people. Somebody's running that deep over and you're in cover one. Like if you're in one rat or one hole, right, in Madden, you're chasing that guy across the field. And when you're in the too high and you're playing a match coverage, you're leveraging that route by the alignment of that quarter safety of the opposite side of the field. So, like when we look at 3-by-1 with quarters, the weak safety away from the passing strength, if you're playing cover 4 mod, so man outside and deep, that's the rules for the corners. That weak side quarter safety, he's poaching number 3. So if number 3 is vertical and starting to cross the formation, he has all of him. So if that's Tyreek Hill, 99 speed Madden, like fastest dude in the game, right? They're not trying to play catch up to him when he from lower in the box or whatever. Like if it's cover 3 and the weak side hook player has 3 up as 3, and he's got to go try to catch Tyreek Hill. Well, that over route, usually when that linebacker is matching 3 up as 3, he's picking that route up around 14 yards. Well, Tyreek is so fast, he would have to catch him at 20 yards. There's no way he's getting to that. Like Alabama, Ohio State, Devonta Smith ran that deep over in Tough Borland. That dude was like a neck roll. White linebacker from Ohio State was like just running for his life. So it looked like he was in quicksand. And it was a huge explosive touchdown in that game. Well, instead of trying to chase that down, you're leveraging it. So that safety, there's so much cushion there that once he sees that route distribution, he's playing top down. He's letting everything play out in front of him. And it's so much easier to match that deep presser and play the ball there. And so it's a lot harder window to fit that in. And, a lot of times it cancels out that route. And so that's why this defense, like the Fangio, Staley amalgamation of a couple other defenses and made it into their own, that's why that's been so successful against some of these offenses, because that particular route kind of gets taken away.
One thing I heard in the last couple of weeks was about Tyreek and how much he loves Tua. They were talking about that last season, that Tyreek, I think, only had one reception over 20 yards downfield with the catch point all year. He only had one single. I think it was, he only had one. And it's because everyone seemed to be playing the Chiefs last year, playing a heavy amount of quarters. So I think everyone saw what Buffalo was able to do containing him, and they started repeating that last year. It's definitely been picking up everywhere. But the way Buffalo plays quarters is from a 4-3. And you prefer it from a 3-4.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe talk about why you prefer it from a 3-4? And then we can transition maybe into talking about Fangio and Staley and how that scheme has evolved over time. But, yeah, why 3-4?
So why I like 3-4 quarters versus the 4-3 is those safeties are in the fifth. Even if you cheat them up to 10 yards, then I think Staley was a little bit more aggressive with just playing them around 10, 11 yards than Fangio. I think Fangio played them around like 12, maybe 13 at most. They're in the fifth. So if you give up a seam in the run game inside, you're getting offensive lineman on a backer. That tackle is happening maybe of a safety fitting the run 5 to 7 yards downfield. So that's one of the problems that I have with. I'm sure there's answers for it, right? There's obviously the respective run fits, but what I like about the 3-4 with quarters is I like to utilize. I essentially create the tight front. We're just talking base 3-4, your ends are in 4 techniques. They're heads up on the tackle.
3-4 odd.
Yeah, 3-4 odd. Thank you. They're heads up on the tackles. And so what I do is I slant the D-line in. So because a 4-eye, which is really what the tight front end is, what I'm trying to create with 3-4 odd, they're just slightly shaded inside the tackle. So they're going to be a B-gap player. And then my nose, by crashing down the defensive line or slanting them inside, that nose is going to 2-gap. And so what I need him to do is play a gap and a half. And this is where it's kind of great coming from different influences, because if you look at like Rex Ryan in that scheme is a 1-gap. But when we have a 0 technique heads up on the center, 2-gapping, really, I only need him to play a gap and a half, and Brandon Staley talks about that all the time. I'm playing the best of both worlds. I'm playing a 2-gap, 3-4 defense that, like, let's say Don Capers ran, right? And if you don't have all the right people across the line to 2-gap, you're going to leave a gap somewhere, and they're going to find it. So it's mixing that and the 1-gap 3-4. And so if that nose is working to play side A-gap, that backer that's stacked on top of him, on top of the nose, or maybe shaded, weak side, he's just got to stack that nose, track the ball, and be able to fall back into that backside A-gap if it's inside zone, and they cut it back in that backside A-gap. And you're going to have that end on the backside. He's going to have that B-gap. So what you're essentially doing is that's a way to clog the interior gap. And forget who said it, somebody from the Pruitt tree was talking about building a bear, essentially kind of building a bear front. Like, I got my A-gap taken care of by my nose and my inside linebacker. I have both ends taking care of my B-gaps. They're just coming from a wider alignment, which is a harder technique to block by for a double team for, like, let's say inside zone. And then I have those safeties playing top down. So if I have backers fitting an A-gap, or one that's kind of tracking the running back, let's say he's bouncing inside zone because we had that nose play that A-gap and that end crashing in to play that B-gap. And so that strong side backer is flowing over the top of that end. He's stacking him and he's tracking the ball, and he can play that C-gap. Even if he somehow gets outside of him or misses a tackle, then I have those safeties playing top down as another layer in that defense and fitting the run. So I am spilling everything from the inside, and I have those safeties running the alleys playing top down. And when I go back to, like, how we did it in high school, that's basically what we did, but from a different alignment. But I like the way that this sets up better. Because it really makes it hard, especially if you're an inside zone team running against it. Makes it easier for backers to flow to the ball. And when we spill that one way or another, those safeties have that much more time
to clarify,
to rally the ball.
That nose tackle to 2-gap, because he does not, typically, at least in my experience, 2-gap if you do nothing. You really need to crash the D-line down or crash it up twice, correct?
So it's left on the D-pad and then down on the right stick. But there's an issue with some of these mechanics in Madden 22. So I do it twice. Sometimes I'm like just neurotically doing it like multiple times to make sure that they pinch in. So that way I can make sure we get that front. But that's exactly right. You have to make that adjustment with 3-4 odd or 3-3-5 odd in order for them to play that way.
The defensive tackle will go from having an arrow going through an A-gap, and it'll change to looking almost like a T symbol right over the center.
Yep.
And that's kind of their symbol for saying, okay, this guy's 2-gapping. He's going to try and kind of steer the center into filling a gap. He's going to basically hog both A-gaps, or the majority of both A-gaps, and make it very, very difficult for anyone to run like a dive or an ISO right up that A-gap.
Yep. So basically he's going to you probably have heard it called like a lag nose, where he's going to stay square, not get reached, like working play side, but he's actually playing a little bit more heavier to the backside. So he's washing down and squeezing that play side A gap, but he's really trying to keep his body and his leverage in the backside A gap, so he can shed that block. If they bend inside zone, try to bend it behind him, he can fall back right into that A gap and make the tackle. So that's a gap and a half. And you only really need one guy to do that in the way that I play it in Madden. That guy's the nose. When you look at the 4-3, right? One gap defense, each person's responsible for a gap. Maybe like my linebacker might two gap, right? Because he's going to have two gap responsibilities when the ball goes, depending on how the front changes, right? So that's where, again, you get that, they are able to get that vertical seam, then they're getting on that safety a lot quicker. So, and they're fitting those gaps. With this approach, right, where we're playing hard in those B gaps with those double teams, and then that nose is two gapping, playing really a gap and a half, and we're not fitting a gap necessarily with the backers, we're fitting the ball. So we're essentially making the defensive line right on the second level. So instead of, okay, I'm strong side Mike linebacker or inside linebacker, I got play side A gap, right? Not really. I'm gonna stack my defensive line and stack behind them to keep me clean from double teams getting to me. I'm gonna track the ball, and then if they cut back, like you're slow playing it, then I'm gonna fall back into that gap because I've already stacked the D linemen. It's gonna make it real hard for that double team to work up to me because depending on where I go, and if that back gets that read to cut it inside, or specifically inside zone, then I can fall back right in the back gap and I'm making the play. So you're not worried about the second level, is not really worried about gap assignments and things like that. I think that's where you can have your two inside linebackers being more of a hybrid, like that 220, like barely 230 kind of size. So they're going to have the speed to drop back in coverage because they're going to play a lot of middle hooks, a three receiver hook, or they're going to have a quarter flat, probably a quarter flat to the weak side. But I would rather play from the 3-4 because, you're really simplifying what they're going to do if they're having a hard time running the ball with that front. And it makes it harder for running backs, making correct reads and getting positive gains. Whereas, again, if you one gap and they find that they're able to win in one of those gaps and hit it, like it's almost a home run play. And when you beat somebody big on a run play, it's not like a DB where you threw a ball over one DB and it's like, oh, he's feeling like crap, right? You just beat all 11 players on that defense. That's what it feels like. And that's when I used to coach, that's what I would talk about. So that we would definitely, sell out on stopping the run first. But that's why I prefer the 3-4 versus the 4-3 is to really muddy those things up for the back, running back reads, make them right on the second level, and it lets, in my opinion, makes it easier as just Madden as a user, right, to play the back versus trying to be really gap, to have that gap discipline in a 4-3.
Yeah, that's what was going to be my next question. It sounds like that makes it a lot easier to user than in a lot of other systems. The biggest complaint I've heard, and a lot of it comes from Fury from our league, who is going to be a future guest on this podcast. He's been very upset with the quarter flats, this Madden in particular, and I definitely see where he's coming from. They seem to transition really poorly, and they match kind of slow.
Yep.
What are some adjustments, and would you recommend someone using those flat defenders, or do you think they're better suited as the backer? And if so, How are you accounting for some of the issues? I'm hoping they're all going to be better in 23, but, you know, I'm also a little skeptical.
Well, if the beta's any indicator, you should feel optimistic. I was happy with, you know, how they were playing there. It wasn't perfect. There was obviously still some bugs. And so hopefully those are all fixed by whenever it launches in a couple weeks. But quarter flat players played a lot better, right? I never user any quarter flat player. Like 98.999% of the time, I am using the 3 receiver hook. So whoever that guy is, that is who I'm using, because I think it's more crucial to having this coverage shut down, whatever your run and shoot or Adams air raid, or, you know, whatever spread team's running, whatever they're running. I've gotten a lot better at being able to find whoever number 3 is, or whoever the final number 3 is, and be able to match those appropriately. So it gives my pass rush a lot more time to get to the quarterback, and it confuses a lot of people that don't know how to read it.
I think it'd be really beneficial for our audience as well as for myself. I am admittedly pretty bad at using in coverage. I've had to adapt how to make adjustments quick and how to disguise my defenses really well, and I've tried to just excel at everything outside of using in coverage, because that's always been my weakest part of my game defensively. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's really where you focus on, and you've been dominating. For someone that maybe has used it a different way, or, you know, maybe, you know, isn't well trained, how does someone go into this quarters approach from either, I'm assuming you're basing out of something like 3-3-5 odd, 3-3-5 Sam, or 3-4 odd, because those seem like, from when I played you, those are probably your base sets, with maybe the 3-3-5 cub or wide, as it used to be called in 22 and earlier. As that's kind of your wheelhouse, yep, formationally, right?
For the most part, yeah.
So when you're using a linebacker, that middle, whoever that 3 receiver hook player is, what's your approach? What's your mentality? Are you keying on the run initially and then backing out? Are you backing up and then maybe coming back down on the run? Like, can you explain it as if I'm 5, as they say on Reddit? How do you use the 3 receiver hook?
So I forgot to answer part of your last question, but you were talking about quarter flat players, and they don't play well in 22. How do I deal with that? Well, a lot of times I just let them play. And the only time I would really change that is I would shade down to put those guys in hard flats. Everybody else has their matching rules except for those quarter flat players. If somebody's throwing a lot of mesh against me, or I have drags going to both sides or shallow crosses going to both sides, that's the better way to play that. But to go to this question about you using the 3 receiver hook, I'm initially trying to identify who's number 3 pre-snap. So if you have 2x2 gun with the back to the right, passing strength, how Madden does it, they put the passing strength to the X receiver slot. So if you had a attached tight end running back to that same side, and then the Z receiver to the right, to make that 2x2, in Madden, that would actually be the weak side. But when you look at the 5 eligible receivers, and that formation, this is use gun doubles, right? Is what I was describing earlier. Where you actually have the strength in your eligible receivers is to the other side, to the receiver, the tight end, and the running back. So when I first look at that, you count outside ends. So outside receivers, 1, in the gun doubles example, your slot and your tight end are number 2, and your back is number 3. So that to me is a passing strength that I am working toward, and I'm seeing how number 3 changes from there. So if the back goes to the flat, and what really should happen, let's say if the Y releases vertically and the back goes to the flat, that quarter flat player should take him. He should have first to the flat. And then I would be helping carry, who is the number 2, now becomes the new number 3, because that running back, if they went straight to the flat, they're now outside of them. They became the new number 2. We essentially switched as we were counting pre-snap, who's number 2 and who's number 3, right? So then I would look to carry that new number 3, who would be the tight end vertically, and deliver him to the safety. Once I've done that, I'm looking for work. I'm looking for a fourth crosser, or a fourth receiver coming to flood the strong side. I'm looking for additional work back there, or I'm just going to sit about 8 to 10 yards off the ball and wait for a backside dig or something else to come there. So I'm looking for work. That's how I user a lot of times it's a 3 receiver hook. Now let's say if we got trips or gun wide trips to the right, so I have my outside receiver, my slot, my tight end back away, and then the solo wide receiver on the left hand side there, if you're looking at it as if you're the quarterback, right? Then that Y is my pre-snap number 3. So if he goes vertical, I need to carry and deliver him to the weak safety we talked about earlier, where that weak safety is playing poach. So he's got number 3 vertical when he gets over on the top. So I need to make sure that they don't, try to quick throw that, or if that tight end sits down in a curl or something like that, I got to be able to take that away. So let's say they run 4 vertical out of that gun Y trip. And let's say they make an adjustment where the X wide receiver, they put him on a drag. Let's say they they're getting all crazy and they wheeled that running back out, right? So they're going to try to bring that corner down and wheel out that running back. Well, in that case, like that backside, that converts to man coverage, essentially. That corner should be what you'll see in some of these playbooks called Meg, man everywhere they go. So he'll be Meg rules, man on man, on that X wide receiver, and then that weak side inside linebacker, who they would I would definitely, I don't care who would take that drag coming to the passing strength, I would bracket it essentially with a 3 receiver hook. And so if that was going to be their check down on 4 verticals like that, now they're getting a pass rusher in their face because I just took away their last option. So hopefully you were able to follow me through my, walking through this mentally. It's a lot easier to draw it all up.
What other coverages do you mix in, and when do you kind of go to those in order to, change things up?
So aside from quarters, I play a lot of palms. So palms is really 2 read. So we'll play cut. So if you have let's just work one side. If you have outside wide receiver, the number 1 going vertical and number 2 is out, the corner, anything going to the outside, number 2 goes outside in the first 5 yards, he's going to cut him off and essentially trap that out, and then the safety will push over and take number 1 vertical. So that's palms and 2 read and 2 by 2. But when it's 2 3 by 1, it actually plays a save-in quarters check called stubby, where your corners on either side are meg rules, so they're man on man with the number 1 outside receiver, and to the strength between number 3 and number 2, the safety and the star, who is the nickel to that side, they're reading from 3 to 2, and so if 3 is vertical, the safety's got him, and the star has number 2. But if one of them is out, that star will have whoever goes to the flat, and that safety will have whoever goes vertical. And so that's a check that I use there. But it's not just those 2. I will run cover 3 buzz weak, so that backside safety coming down, We talked earlier about match-free coverage, where the weak side hook player has 3 up as 3, so that using that 4 verticals example where that Y comes over on that special route, or that looks like a little bit of a deep over, that safety coming from leverage is going to has all of hand. It will match hand come across the formation. I don't use that as much, but I really want that to be the bigger change-up that I have coverage-wise, versus people. And then another check or 3-by-1 coverage that I took from Staley and Fangio is in Madden is cover 9. You're playing halves to the passing strength, quarters away. That weak side safety is poaching 3 vertical, just like we talked about in quarters. But otherwise, you're flooding more coverage to the passing strength. So like the Rams, when Staley was at the Rams, he did this with Ramsey. Ramsey was man-on-man with whoever. So he's canceling out that solo receiver, and they're pushing all the coverage to the other side. They're playing 5 over 3 with that versus 4 over 3 with quarters. So that's a common check that I'll have. I really don't call cover 6 much. The only time I would do that is to really play what would be cover 9, but to the misaligned passing strength we talked about with gun double, where you really have the passing strength is to the tight end and the running back to the same side with that split out wide receiver. And so I want the halves playing to that side. So that's really all the coverages I run, and then I'll sprinkle in every once in a while some one robber, which I almost had a pick 6 against you tonight when I mixed in one robber when you went 5 wide. I really don't play a lot of cover 1 or cover 3, excuse me, to trips at all. Because structurally it gives you problems. I know with match, like your nickel or your star is going to carry 2 vertical. Like if you're running 4 verticals, like that's a killer of cover 3, right? Or at least a big killer of cover 3. I'm not overly trusting of that. I like it more in plays where you're either gonna run a hook or some sort of stop route where that safety is rotating down, or if you're running something like a drive, or you're running some sort of crosser, either shallow crosser or slant or whatever it is, where you think that you saw that weak side backer just beat feet out to the flat with the running back, and you think that's an open void and underneath coverage because the strong hook kind of sat there and you got underneath that. Well, you're essentially robbing it with that down safety. And that's where, if people aren't reading safety rotation, that's where I get wins and where I get interceptions, is in utilizing it that way, especially if I've been playing so much quarters and palms, or even half quarter with cover 9, right? Once you see that safety rotate down, then like everything changes. Like what just happened? And so that's why I play almost exclusively from a too high safety look, because I'm going to make you read those safeties, and when you get lax in that's when you're going to pay. And it works the same way with one robber too, because the weak side safety rotates down.
That has baseline. I know in our league and in several other, sim leagues, they don't allow baseline because it's not really based in reality, and it really allows some kind of weird things. It's a Madden thing, not a real life thing. What are some things you do to make your defense always kind of have a similar look?
So the only time where I'm really going to be doing any sort of adjustment to maintain that too high structure with a 1 high coverage is when I play 3 match. So I come out in quarters, I move those safeties, I try to barely move them. But move both safeties and then audible into 3 match. Those safeties are going to stay right where they're at. You're going to see underneath coverage change. You might see those corners open up more of at a 45-degree angle to the quarterback. depending, you're going to probably see one of those backers that was apexed out on a number 2 receiver. Like if you had a tight end that was flexed, you might see him walk into the box because now he's a hook player and you're going to have a safety rotating down to that side. So I just gave you away if you actually pay attention to what you're looking at when I'm making my adjustments. I don't call it very much, so have fun looking out for that all game to only see it maybe once. But that's how I do that, to make sure I maintain that pre-snap presentation, and then have that picture change on you post-snap.
What offenses give this scheme the most headaches in your experience in Madden?
I would say for me, spread teams are more challenging because you just have more people in space. Like if you spread out that wide tight end and you flex him out, you're going to walk. If I'm in nickel personnel, a backer's going to walk out on that guy. So if you do like what you do in 10 personnel, where you have 1 running back, no tight end, 4 wide receivers, and if I'm in nickel personnel, that's a mismatch on that guy. Or if you have Kyle Pitts as your tight end, and I don't have all that athletic of a linebacker, who's going to be playing that quarter flat over to that side, that's going to be a problem too. So that might get you into more dime sets and then you're a little bit more, you're not as stout with the run, especially if they're going to set the 3 technique to the same side as the back. And that leaves a wide open B gap, and people like you will run half back base, which is one back power essentially, and it makes it real tough to defend that unless you adjust to a different type of front that I did tonight. But I would play like you were talking before that 3-3-5 Sam. You can either pinch down the D line into a mint front, so be a 4-eye, a 0, and actually is playing like a loose 3 versus a 4-eye. Or depending on the formation, you might have to shift them to the right to get them to line that. Do your adjustment to slant them in so you get that nose two-gapping, and then you kind of alleviate that problem, but you're still going to have that linebacker apex, and that's where I think can create some issues for me. But like Adam, he's so high tempo, and he's constantly going. I was in 2 palms almost the entire night and 3-3-5 cams. I was very lucky to play well against him in that, but I mean, I was at a clear disadvantage with that linebacker apex out there.
If you were doing a Madden fantasy draft and you were going to take your 11 starters on defense first, what order would you go after each position? And what would be the defining traits that you would select? Man,
I'd almost take either a nose tackle guy like a Kenny Clark, who can play that 2-gap, or an Aaron Donald. I'd probably take them, or a top end corner like Jair Alexander or Jalen Ramsey. Because if I'm playing that cover 9 and I got, I have 5/3 to the passing strength and 3x1, like I need him to be on an island and to win. So that's why I would say that guy. And then I want just that one guy in that front that can play a gap and a half. I'd really prefer that to be my nose tackle, and so that's why like Kenny Clark is that guy for me. So if I'm going at this fantasy draft, those would be 2 of my first picks there. I'd probably try to fill in safeties right behind that. Safeties, and then inside linebacker. I don't need a high overall there. I want them to be fast. I want them to be 85 plus speed, because if I got to match routes coming across the field, like I need to be able to accelerate and catch up to them quickly, and be able to use that away. So like if we're talking like archetypes when I'm looking at this kind of stuff, your nose tackle is a run stopping or run stuffing guy. Your corners, the disguise 3-4 scheme archetype in Madden will have your corners be man-to-man corners. And you do the same thing, I like those guys to be slot. So if I'm developing them and I'm picking whatever one of the three archetypes, man-to-man, zone, or slot, I'm picking slot because it's going to be pretty heavily predicated on man-to-man. It's going to have a lot more player requisition because that guy's going to fit a lot more, and they're going to be focused on tackling. And if I have those corners out on an island, or they're going to have to tackle in space, so I'm going to need them to be better tacklers. And then those safeties are a hybrid, so they're because they're going to be matching in man coverage receivers too. So I would go safeties next there. Again, I want them to be plus 70 tackle rating, and then man coverage, as long as they don't suck. I don't want somebody that's like 60s man coverage. But the speed there, I need, except for my star, I need everybody to be 90 plus speed. I don't need 95 to be successful. I just need 90 plus speed. And then my star is where I can give up a little bit of speed there. Like I'm playing with Rasul Douglas right now. He's 88 speed. I just got him up to like an 80 overall. And he's actually more of a zone corner when I got him, but he's 6'2", 209 pounds. Like, that guy is essentially going to be that third linebacker. He's going to be in the fit a lot. I need him to play like a hybrid guy. So if you play like big nickel over G and that guy's a safety anyway, I would have that be my number 3 safety, either real good number 3 safety, or even like a Minka Fitzpatrick, because he actually played the star position at Alabama. I would have him there. And that's a pretty important position of the defense. But that's how I would start building that out. And then the defensive line, those two ends, like they don't need to be high overall guys. Like they can be like mid-70s overall. I want them to be strong, 300 plus, strong, and pretty quick. So I would say over 72 speed. I mean, if they're like 75, 77 speed, like that, even better, because they're my one gap players in that front, and that run stuffing nose tackle, the two gapping. He doesn't need to be super fast. He just needs to be really strong at that point of attack. So these guys that are kind of strong at the point of attack, but they're going to pinch in real quick and make that ball change direction. So that's where I would focus when looking at those, and then I think I pretty much covered it. But the weak inside linebacker, he's going to be a little bit more of a pass coverage guy. Both of them I developed as pass coverage, and that's the same as the guy's 3-4 archetypes. So those are the kinds of players that I look for there. Not necessarily I need a lot of high zone coverage ability. Just need them to run. That's all I need. I just need them to run. So I kind of feel bad because it's like, oh, you're looking for that user dude where you put a safety at linebacker and you're a user god with a 94 speed safety. Not necessarily that, but it's a little bit of that same principle. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you back. And again, if anyone has any questions for Coach Scott, he is very active in our Discord server. The game plan, you can find the link down in the description. Is there anything else you want to plug while you're here?
So I am slowly but surely putting together guides for both my wide zone offenses where I'm starting first, and then I'm just trying to get as detailed as I can with explanations, and then create tutorials for each one of those concepts. So those tutorials probably aren't going to come until Madden 23, given how close we are to launch. But working on that, and then subsequently I will be putting together a guide for the Sky 3-4 defense, the Fangio, Staley style defense. So you'll get some of this, all the fronts that I use in depth. I'm probably going to keep a couple blitzes secret, and maybe a third down special kind of coverage situation secret. But I'll give you at least 80% of the defense. So that way you guys can use it there. So, but you can feel free to ask me questions in those, in that server, and those, we have different channels for both of those schemes. And I am more than happy to talk ball.
and I do have, like I mentioned earlier, I have a full guide on the 4.75 defense, and I have a separate one that is on like the Saban and Kirby Smart 3-4.
Yep.
I do plan on updating both of those for Madden 23 as we, the playbook change and adapt and update. I try and go back and revisit a lot of those older guides that I've put out, and those are two that I think are probably the most important ones I have for the defense. I am currently working on a Tampa 2 guide. It's a little slow in coming, but I'm working on it. And I'm going to try and get that out before Madden 23 drops. If anyone has any questions, by all means, drop them down in the comments. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, share it with your friends, and come chat with us in the Discord. Have a good one. Bye, guys.